Good morning. Welcome to LoveBabz, LoveTalk. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So today is the DNC recap with Paul Bass and Christine Bartlett Josie because they were both at the DNC at the Democratic National Convention. And Nora, who was there too. I really wanted to talk to Nora too because she was at the RNC and I wanted to contrast the DNC. But she is on vacation. So and she is in California, and she is not going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to talk to me. So, so, so Paul and Christine will be riding shotgun this morning, and I'll be interested in hearing what they got to say about the DNC. I told them before they left, at least I thought I told Paul. I said two things is going to happen at the DNC. They're going to caucus, and they're going to party. So I think he's gonna get I think he got a taste of that life, a party and a caucus. So, and there was a lot going on that floor, which is always is. But I've been reading all the reports about that people said this was the best DNC they've ever been to. Like it was like homecoming, an HBCU homecoming, a family cookout. It was all that rolled up into one. Good morning, Paul Bass. Unmute yourself. Let's see, you're muted. Okay. Good morning, Paul Bass.
Good morning, Babz. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
No complaints. No
Yeah.
complaints. It's nice, had a very nice time in Chicago. Had a fun time blogging with you.
Oh yeah, we did have a fun time blogging.
My favorite thing was when you were getting so excited and Nora was getting so cynical because she was 25 and thinking everybody was full of it. And you and I were baby boomers and older saying, this kind of exciting and fun.
I know Nora was done with us because she was like, oh, these people are like, they on crack. I was like, damn, Nora, it's like that. Like you can't get into the fun of it. Like, golly. Like I am old, but it seemed fun to me. Like I
it was a party
watching it. It was a party. It was a party.
And you met all these people. Like you just met people who were so excited to be there. And sometimes you couldn't get in the arena. You were just out in the hall, and that was like a party too.
Mm-hmm.
And people just had this feeling of hope. Like everybody knew that come September, it was going to get down and dirty and a fight to the finish and upsetting and nail biting. But for a week, I think they felt like this extended honeymoon was getting one more week where all sorts of people from different walks of life who have a vision of America as everybody together rather than everybody at each other's throats had a chance to work together for something they believed in.
So did you see all kinds of people, Paul? Like,
did
you see the rainbow?
There was the rainbow there. There was definitely the rainbow. It was every ethnic group, every, part of the country, all sorts of people. It was a lot of fun. And it was, it was interesting about the sorors because, as you pointed out,
Oh, sorry. Good morning, Christine. You just got to unmute yourself. But Paul is, go ahead. Good morning, Christine. Paul is.
Well, as you pointed out, the Divine Nine are so important, the sororities to this campaign, but they're worried that if they publicly take a stand on it, if Trump wins, he'll get their nonprofit status revoked for being involved in the campaign. So all these women who were involved in the Nine wore white the last night, and the place was flooded with white. And all these people just so lovely and friendly. You meet them, but it couldn't have, like, there were no tables for deltas or alphas.
Oh yeah, no, but that is in our Constitution. It's in our laws. We are not backing candidates. Like we are not doing that. But we could show up in colors.
Mm-hmm. You can know each other and then go
work. Know each other.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, Christine, what was it like for you? Because this is not your first rodeo. I've been to one Democratic convention back in the 80s, and that was, forever ago.
So I've been to everyone since 2008. The last one, obviously, mine was virtual. So, but pure joy. I felt like 2008 on steroids. 2008 was, historic in itself, yes.
Because
And
it was Barack Obama.
yeah, '08 was Obama. And that was fantastic, right? I remember when we got to Denver, there was the feeling in the air. And then on the last day, they moved it from there, like the convention center, to the Mile High Stadium because there were so many people, and they wanted to allow the public in, right? More people in, and that was like that was just very moving. Actually saw one of the I don't Sophia, who is the first African American woman to climb Mount Everest, used to live in Connecticut, and she was a delegate, and Jen Jess and I was a guest. So she was a delegate. She moved to Washington State and is a member of the DNC, and we just connected again because we thought about how it was in '08 compared to now, and then this one was 100 times, 100 times more electrifying. I think because we have been through the last 8 years, 4 years of Trump, and the last 4 years of him just not just pick occupying space, and just so it has just been so hard, I think, for all of us as a country to, well, most of us, or half of us, I should say, to deal with this barrage of garbage, right? It's just been daily, constantly just eating at us. So with this, it just felt like all of that will be lifted and we just goodbye already. It just felt really, really good. It was pure joy. Every day I smiled. Black women were just, I was just greeting, we were greeting, good morning, Black woman. Good morning, beautiful sister. How are you? Hugs and tears. The women caucuses in the morning and the Black caucus, again, hugs and tears, just greeting everybody. The panel discussions were fantastic. I run campaigns, so the march to order, I know what needs to be done. I'm thinking '08. In New Haven, the office was downtown. It was a joint office with Rosa and our Congresswoman and Barack. And every weekend we organize rides to Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, and that's what we're gonna have to do again. We've moved so far ahead technology-wise. People can be anywhere in the state and just log on and get to make phone calls and write postcards. So once again, Connecticut will be probably tasked with New Hampshire and Pennsylvania because that's the closest for us to get to.
So, Paul,
but it
did
was
you have a chance?
electrifying. It was electrifying, Babz. I've never felt, such joy. And I've been going through personal, losses. And I was, I left here, going to St. Lucia to bury my aunt, and we didn't know what was going to happen, right? It was like talking to friends at the DNC, trying to rally people to support Biden and whip votes on the floor because they wanted an open convention, and then to land, and boom, he's dropping out, but he's endorsing her immediately, which was absolutely the Hail Mary for us. He was there to support Barack, and now he's handing us, because if it was going to be an open convention, it was not going to be pretty. Not going to be pretty.
Paul, did you find anything? Did you go to any of the caucus? Did you sit in on any of the conversations? Like, what was it like for you? Because this was your first convention, and I know it was quite overwhelming.
I went to 2 sessions I found very interesting. One of them was sort of all the people who do long-term strategy for the Democratic Party, like pollsters and consultants, Stanley Greenberg, you know him, Joe Trippi. And they were talking about what's going to win over the long term to try to, if you're going to fight for democratic values, not just this election more than others. There was some disagreement, but there was a real feeling that Democrats, especially the policy people, have to stop talking down to people. That if you talk honestly, but if you're talking about that, there's a real feeling that often the voter feels like I'm voting between the asshole and the snob who's talking down to me. So even though I might agree with someone about what should be done with taxes and on the rich, or I might agree with someone about abortion being legal, if I feel like they're lecturing me and telling I'm stupid, then I'm not going to vote for them. And they put that in the case with the economy. So many Democrats feel, when you look at certain economic indicators, that the economy's doing great, right? We've outperformed the rest of the world in terms of after the pandemic. A lot of indicators like unemployment are historically low, inflation's coming down. But then, as Stanley Greenberg said at the session, that's because the people who make a lot of these decisions live on the coasts, and that people aren't stupid because they think milk costs so much more than it used to, that gas, getting to work costs more than it used to. And that it's not just saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about, but I'll listen to you and pretend you're telling the truth. That in fact, you're not listening to how people are really living and having this coastal bias. So that was interesting to me. The other one I went to that I found very interesting was I went to Bernie Sanders talking to labor. So there was a labor, every day there were like 4 caucuses at a time: Asian American Pacific people, people of color caucus, LGBT. And the labor one was not hugely attended. The labor leaders like Gwen Mills from here, they didn't even come. No one from Unite Here, and like Christine could tell me if I'm wrong. I didn't see a single New Haven Unite Here person, and they run the New Haven Democratic Party. They weren't there. But the labor leaders had their caucus. And all the other presidents, the presidents of all the labor unions, a lot of them in the country, they gave these rousing speeches for Kamala Harris. Then Bernie Sanders came up and said only one sentence about Kamala Harris. He talked about how dangerous he thinks Trump is, how bad he is for labor. So he said, of course, we have to elect Harris and Waltz. He didn't say anything positive about them. Then he said, day one, after the election, we have to fight because we're against other people in the party who are corporate interests, who are against workers. And then he said, when you go tonight to the convention, look up at those skyboxes and how expensive they are and the corporations that buy them. So it wasn't like the convention did not really have dissension. And I'll talk to you later if you want about the the uncommitted delegates. And I had my favorite part of the convention was talking to people on both sides of the Gaza divide. And that was really happening in the hallway. And that was fun. And that was interesting. And even in the Bernie session, it wasn't like people came out disunited. People are completely united about the election. There was a good feeling in the air. But it was interesting to me to see Sanders's speech in that context. It was different from his speech on the floor.
Absolutely.
So, Christine, do they do that because the idea is we have to have a united front? So when you go out there, when it's your turn to speak to the bigger body, you got to show up as a person that is engaged in wanting this.
I think everybody got the message. I think for the first time, I felt like even whoever the production of this was phenomenal, because I thought about the USA signs, right? The messaging for Democrats, because the MAGA people all USA and USA with the flags and the signs. So for the Democrats to have done that, I felt, okay, finally, yes, there is a lot of division. I was a Bernie delegate in 2016, and I'm still a huge Bernie fan. I just was looking and said, oh, there's my Bernie mug behind me. And in terms of Bernie's policies, so I totally get, and I'm in a lot of groups with Bernie, so I absolutely get what he's talking about. He's right. But in this instant, as much as there's division, we're all united in the fact that we cannot have a Trump. That is the bottom line. So like Paul said, in the hallways, I went to the pro-Palestinian little gathering with Milan, right? And then there is the pro-Israel. And it's all of it, and all of the divisions and all of the differences of opinion, we're all united in the fact that we cannot have a Trump, and this country needs to be saved from fascism. So within that, once you win, then we could look at policy. And the fact that Kamala talked about Israel, and she talked about Palestinian people having a right to live in peace also. That was because I knew a couple of people in the Connecticut delegation who are just completely pro-Palestine, would just folded their arms until she then spoke, and then they released their arms. So you saw that. But yeah, I think overall it was you literally walking through. I mean, there's corporate boxes, but there are also areas where, like, the strategists were, and Bernie were, and Labor was, and going downstairs to have a drink and meeting all sorts of Congress people, walking through the halls and having those conversations. At the end of the day, many differing opinions, because we are a big tent, but the underlying absolute, we have to vote Waltz, Harris Waltz in, because of what it could be on the other side.
Wow. Okay, so what was the protest like? Did you encounter the protesters? I mean, you had to get in the building. So what was the different protesting?
There were 2 sets of protests. So first they were hoping to have 30,000 people come and make it 1968 where there's war with the police. But not only like about a fifth of those people came out for those big protests. They had a permit to
Yep.
go in a separate place. It wasn't in the hall. It wasn't in the perimeter. And a lot few people show up. For instance, Nora Grace Flood, who was one of our reporters, her roommate came to be one of those protesters. And it was such a disappointment. She didn't even end up going to the protests. And the police were trained so heavily in de-escalation, even though there were police every 2 inches and soldiers. They were the nicest people. You almost felt like they were party hosts. I mean, even Nora liked them, and obviously, that
Yeah.
made the protesters very upset. At one point, they got so frustrated that outside the consulate, they actually rushed the police just so someone can get arrested. But inside, it was much more nuanced inside the room.
Inside.
So you had these uncommitted delegates. You saw a lot of keffiyehs in the halls of people who were pro-Palestine, and you had a lot of yarmulkes in the hall. And then my favorite part was you had people who wore keffiyehs and yarmulkes at the same time. And I was hanging out with some of them. And there, the discussions were more nuanced along the lines that Christine talked about and much more productive. For instance,
Yeah.
I sat with two of the Palestinian people from Florida and Texas who were delegates, and they were very much saying, they were older, they were like our age, and they were very resolute in their opinions of what needs to happen. They said, we really don't want to disrupt this. We don't think that's going to save a single life in Gaza. We're very much for Harris. We believe there's been movement. She doesn't have the state position we have, but what she's saying is we're moving it. We actually are attending the caucuses, and we believe that by going to the caucuses and being here, we can move the needle while staying focused on this election. And similarly, I rode on the plane with a woman from Woodbridge whose sister and brother-in-law were murdered on October 7th. And she went there with her daughter, and they had a whole park in Chicago, a corner with posters, and her sister was the first poster when you walk in about the October 7th hostages. And they too went to all the caucuses. They too were in the hallways. And it's funny, I get stopped by people not showing which side, like, aren't you on a side? You're reporting, you have the yarmulke, you're talking to the guy at the keffiyeh. And that kind of complication was actually very productive. And what I liked about this convention, I felt like it was a place where people had room to care about what they care about and do it in a way that wasn't destructive, it was the opposite in 1968. It was coming, they were so worried they could come out of this convention broken as they were in 1968, and then we had 40 years of conservative government. And we came out of this one where it was so well organized, so on message, such effort to have room for disagreement, but not get in the way of having an effective campaign. I found it very interesting.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Because you saw everybody, and you can have conversations with everybody. Absolutely everybody had a right to their opinion and their voice, and I felt everybody got heard, and there was no huge, it wasn't that. We were all there for a purpose, and just knowing that if we do this, then everything is possible. That's what I think it was. If we do this, we elect these two people, elect this ticket, everything is possible. Everything you want may be possible versus the other side that we don't know. I think that's the feeling I got. Yeah, same thing. But I love seeing both, pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. I love seeing, like you're right, people walking together and having these conversations. There was no deep-seated anger. There was none of that. We're here for a purpose, and we're going to accomplish that purpose, is to get these people elected, that we could move on, that this country could, be what it should be.
So, they pulled out all the stops of bringing the big Democratic celebrated politicians. I mean, the Barack Obama, Michelle Obama. It was a plethora of people who got up on that podium and really delivered. Did you have any personal favorites? Like who won it for you? Who made you feel like, okay, this is it. This is a show.
For me, just strategically, right? Because I do this, I thought between Hillary and Elizabeth Warren, for me, I thought those two women, given the fact that they've ran for president and their speeches, for me, just strategically for women, I was very moved by those two, right? Everybody was fantastic. You can't pick one, or the other, but for me, strategically, I needed to hear from them. And I thought Hillary hit it out the park, given that she was the last female nominee for the party. and, and her campaign and what happened. And then Elizabeth Warren, ironically, the morning Elizabeth addressed, because the New England delegates had breakfast together, and she addressed us then. And loved when she got up and the crowd was emotional and she got emotional. And her speech for me was also fantastic, given again as a woman and Kamala. So with those two, for me, that was it. But on a really fun note, the night that, Sheila E. and John Legend got up and tribute to Prince. So I was like, I'm good. So, I'm good.
I
So
thought that was good too. I mean,
I was like,
I
hey,
would have never said Legend do a Prince
Prince,
song, but he
right.
rocked it. I
He
mean,
rocked it.
he
So
rocked
I
it.
don't, but in all things aside, all the fantastic speeches, it was a performance by, John Legend and Shirley. I was up and everybody was like, Christine.
Christina's a
Because
big,
every
huge
morning you
Prince
get the
fan.
list. Everybody get the list of what's happening, right? And I was like, oh, tonight.
So, Paul, who did you
So,
dig?
Well, my faves were AOC was my number one, just because I'm such a kind of
AOC.
I
fanboy,
appreciated
I'll
her
admit.
too. I
Yes.
And
appreciated her
and
a lot.
the way she connected with the crowd, and the way she distilled about what it meant to be a working person, and there's no
Yes.
shame in it and being proud of. I thought Michelle Obama was the most effective speaker because she was fun, substantive, and really focused on the task of getting people to work. Walls, partly I liked his speech because it was so tight. I think they talk way too long, and the more you say, the less impact you have.
Yeah.
Reverend Al was the highlight for me because of the way he brought on the Central Park Five, both as an antidote, because I personally did not like all the USA. I know why they did it and all the valorization of soldiers and police. And I'm for people who are soldiers and police, but I understand why they did it tactically. But to have him bring the Central Park Five was so important. And the other person I think who was going to be the orator who really takes the Democratic Party in other places, Reverend Warnock. I just thought
Yes.
he was one of the first nights, but he was very moving. I thought Biden was very ineffective. He was just an angry, bitter, out of touch old man who talked too long. I thought Emhoff's story, everybody loved him as sort of like a regular guy. It didn't ring real to me. I think he's a corporate guy. So you're not going to get 100% of speeches being great. The speech I found the most interesting tactically was Kamala's, because I didn't realize what was going on until later, because we had 3.5 nights of just pure energy, on fire. She'd come off these rallies where she was at the best form she ever was as an exciting speaker, call and response with the crowd, exciting, fired up. So then I'm wondering, why is she giving this like calm, measured speech that's all about reassuring you that she's steady, that she's going to have economic policies that appeal to all, that she's going to be strong on the military. And then the reason was obvious later, and it was a very smart tactical move, which was that this was about people who aren't comfortable with Donald Trump but aren't comfortable voting for a black woman. And that she just had to introduce that to them after you fired everybody up so much to go out and work and be excited about a cause. She had to seal the deal with the moderates and the persuadables. And that to me was another symbol of why I felt this was actually a 1992 convention, which is that this party now is so organized and so determined to win that they're not going to give any room for mistakes. They're not going to give any lever to the Republicans to try to win. They're going to have everything planned so that they're going to make sure that there's no disruption. They're not going to put on a speaker who might go off script. They're not going to have chaos at the convention. They're not going to hand the Republicans anything, a line or an image that they can use against them. And, it's going to be a fight to the finish. This is, there was the high of the convention, but this is a tough, tough election. And I think what was pissing off the Republicans is how together the Democrats had it. And Kamala's speech to me, tactically, was a reflection of how in just 4 weeks, which is amazing. This was done in 4 weeks, not in like 6 months planning for this convention. And somehow this tightened frame is focusing them on strategy. She came out of that. The key thing was those first 48 hours. She came out of the door after Biden said she wasn't running. She made the 100 calls she had to make. They did the big Zoom calls. She nailed it. She earned it because she came out so fast and so focused. And in some ways, I think it's been a gift that they have a talented group of people who have this short time to put together convention night in 4 weeks with all those pressures of what could go wrong was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And to now not making mistakes, to up your numbers so quick so that it's an even race now with some momentum. That to me was, that's what made me think 92, because 92 was the last, well, actually, Obama made an amazing campaign
What
in a
was
different
92?
way.
I was not, 92 I was a baby.
Well, Bill Clinton's campaign, he
Okay.
did
Yeah.
some things we didn't like because he
Yeah.
wasn't going to give them an inch. Now, this was a different time in our country. When Obama ran, it was time for the Hope campaign, right? And Clinton
Right.
did a Hope thing too, but Obama was like, people were excited about a civil rights campaign. A lot of white people who sometimes have some racist ideas, they kind of loved voting for Obama, right? There was a different thing
Yeah,
going on in the
absolutely.
country.
Yeah.
And then a backlash. In 92, we had 12 years of Reagan Bush.
Okay.
And the Democrats were on the defensive. The tone of the public discussion had shifted in a way, in a very conservative direction. And Clinton wasn't going to give him an inch. He rushed back to his home state of Arkansas to execute a prisoner who had a 60 IQ. That, no liberal would ever execute someone who was functionally mentally retarded, right? He did the Sister Soldier in the corridor one day to give some signals to the good. I mean, he just ran a campaign with, even if that wasn't sincerely what he was going to do when he governed, because he was later called the first black president. But they were not going to give the Republicans any of their wedge issues. And they were so focused on how they ran everything. You had Carville, you had Stephanopoulos, you had Stanley Green. You had people who were so attentive to every detail of how you run a smart campaign. And they were just gonna, everything was organized, so focused on winning. And I think, and it's not a criticism at all. Like with Kamala, I don't
Right.
think she's doing it in any way that is like against her principles. But you weren't gonna push these people around. You weren't gonna bully them. You weren't gonna use cheap issues that you can sometimes succeed on. Like they tried with Walls, the false valor thing, because Trump's one of his top aides is Lasivita, who did the whole fake campaign against Kerry when he had a campaign in Bush, who was a draft dodger against the war hero. So the way he turned it around was to question the war hero and make up a story and say it was Swift Boat. They tried that with Walls and it didn't work this time.
Yeah.
It boomeranged, and people who served in the military
Well, do
said,
you
"Why are you
think people
dumping on
were
this guy?"
prepared? Like they saw the
Yeah, they're ready.
they saw what this was, and they were like, "Oh no, we're not."
That's what's making me think of 92. These people are like out to win. They're ready. They're focused. They're paying attention to every detail. They have 100 days. They're not going to get caught off track. It's going to be a fight to the finish.
I
So what do you
think
think of
the
the money?
timing. Sorry, I think
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
timing. Sorry, the timing is, like I said, I'm on a plane going and I land, and by the time 2 weeks later I'm back here, and it's like the entire energy just shifted, right? I was worried. All friends in the DNC and all of us talking, and my friends all over and delegates, and we worried. And I come back 2 weeks later, and the entire feeling has changed. Everybody's excited, and we know what we have to do on the ground to win. But you're very right. Observation there. I mean, it's very hard to hear the speeches in the hall. It is really hard. That's when people start to. It's really hard. So I needed to have listened to it. Like I've gone on and listened to parts of speeches I did not really hear because of the crowd and the yay and yay. But overall, I think you're very right, Paul. Like the caucuses I went to and meetings in between, people are very focused, and there's a very tight ship being ran right now. Very tight. No mistakes to be made.
But what I find most impressive, and a lot of it I find impressive, is the amount of money that Kamala has been able to raise in a short period of time. Because I'm sure that was on the minds of people when she became the nominee. And can a black woman raise this kind of, does she have the kind of cachet to raise this kind of money? And clearly now we see that she can. They're a little more than $500 million in a short period of time. I don't
And do you
even know
remember
if
how
that's-
within hours of Biden announcing she had filed papers to rename the campaign committee?
Yeah.
And she had those mass Zoom calls where people had them ready. That's what I meant about being on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
But
I was part of the 44,000. I was on that call, that very first call. It was exciting. It's crazy.
Immediately, what the thing when they were talking about it not being her, but they also had to realize that the Biden-Harris money was her money. You cannot, based on finance, campaign finance laws. That money can't go to anybody else. So whatever money Biden Harris raised, that only person that could have used that money was her. So that's another thing too. They were like, so if anybody else was coming, names were coming up, they were like, you can't use that money. So yes, but in a very short space of time, it feels like a very tightly ran ship. Very, very good.
So
And
what
it's
do you
interesting
think
what a
needs to
contrast
happen?
that
Oh,
is.
go ahead.
What a contrast that is to her primary campaign in 2020 when she went through several people running it. They lost their direction. Part of the
Yep.
argument is that no matter how good a politician you are, there are times when it's your time and it's times when it's not. So that in
Timing.
2020, it was George Floyd. It wasn't the year for a prosecutor. This year,
Yeah.
it wasn't just Kamala Harris. It was Angela Ashbrook, right? This really interesting candidate in Maryland who has a
Yes.
similar profile, similar kind of speech. So, on the money thing, I'm interested in what you two think about this. I've always felt like it's essential you have enough money to run and get on the airwaves and hire staff. And then after a certain point, it's not about the money. Like Trump's going to have plenty of money. Harris is going to have plenty of money. So they're both in it. But then there's a lot of free media that determines so much. Like, Donald Trump, what made him crazy for the last few weeks, it wasn't all about him, the media. He's usually the guy you're reading about. And that's free for good and for bad. And Kamala Harris had this kind of image for a few weeks, drove Trump crazy that she looked nice. He said he's more handsome, but she looked nice. There's a lot of free media. So you do need that bedrock of money. It is a symbol that your campaign that is in it. But beyond that, no amount of money can change whether people are tired of Trump or not, or still enjoy watching him, whether Kamala Harris is going to continue this feeling of upbeat joy and this sort of crusade that's very quick and newsy. And so a lot of it's not money as well, I think.
That's interesting. I like it. So what do you think they need to do now? What should happen? Now we're out of the convention. We're a few days out of it. What should happen now, Christine? Like where should the energy go now? And how do you sustain this energy? Which I kind of like that it's a short period of time, because I think if this had to be sustained for months or a year, it would just be nauseating. But because you've got a short window here, people's attention spans can focus, and it feels like a short run.
Yeah. Well, I'm encouraging everybody to get on harriswalls.com. There's already things set up for people to make phone calls and write postcards. All of that is already being done. I'm waiting for some direction myself as to how we're going to start organizing boots on the ground to head to Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. But everything is up and running on the website. Anything you want to do as of now, make phone calls, write postcards, it is on the website. So I encourage everybody to go do that. And I'm waiting for further instruction, honestly. But
I'm going to James Foreman's house on the 8th to do postcards or
yeah.
to do letters or whatever it is we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you guys about postcards and letters? Like I know Marcy Lynn is physically going to Philadelphia for a few months to help work on the ground there. How much does it work? I was talking to Gwen Mills, who's the head of Unite Here, used to be in New Haven, and they run Nevada. She said the most important thing, not the other stuff doesn't matter, but the most important thing is face-to-face, and that in Nevada, they always pair someone who has a similar job and lives in a similar neighborhood to yours to go to your door so that you can relate. And that's how they do union organizing. To what extent do phone calls and postcard work?
They work. I mean, they work. I think they work. I've done it. I mean, so during the pandemic, since we could not do a lot of door-to-door, postcards and phone calls worked. And it's simply saying, hi, I'm your neighbor, or I live, it's personalizing those things. And in the same way, you pair people, like when I was trying to find her too at the convention. Same way you pair people, you do the same thing with postcards, right? You understand the person. There is a little when you get the list, it sort of gives you an idea of what demographic that person is, and then you write those notes accordingly. But face-to-face has always been the most effective, and it will continue to be the most effective. With all the technology, face-to-face has always been the most effective. So that has to happen. And people are willing to drive. In OA, people are willing to drive. I mean, every weekend, maybe I think they have 10, 12 cars downtown and people would just hop in, and we go to Pennsylvania, and we go to New Hampshire, and that's going to happen again.
Okay, I like it. I mean, I like it. I like the momentum. I still think it's so what do you think about the debate that's coming? Because now, I don't know, is the debate gonna happen or not happen? What do you think?
Well, I think when it happens, the prosecutor is going to be all in. We don't know. I mean, who knows what the other side is doing? I think it's going to be. I'm eagerly awaiting the first debate with them. Well,
What do I think is that I'm very wary about making predictions. You can make scenarios. I mean, this is a real fight to the finish.
yeah,
Kamala Harris has real strengths. Trump politically has real strengths. I obviously think he has a weakness of staying on message in a debate. I think after the first 15 minutes, he has a hard time. But I would not predict what will happen in that debate because the expectations are going to be low for Trump if he doesn't act like a woman abuser, and isn't saying crazy stuff. That'll be considered a plus, right? If Kamala says
well, right
something
now
off
they're
message.
fighting about the hot mic part. Like Kamala, people said keep the mics open. People should hear everything.
It's an interesting race. I
Trump
think
people
this
are
race
like-
is so tied. It's not funny. Definitely momentum on the Harris side. But, I was talked to a whole bunch of people last day who are convinced she's going to win. And I was just so surprised. These are really smart people. Not that I'm any smarter. I'm actually less smart than these people, right? But I could see her winning. She definitely has momentum, and you want to be the campaign that has the momentum and that feels good, right? That's where you want to be. But I think this is a very tied race.
I know. I feel like she's gonna win too. Like I just feel it in the spaces that I see people in, and it feels how I felt about Barack Obama. I have that same sense of this is the time. Like it feels like the time. I didn't feel that way with Hillary Clinton. I wanted Hillary Clinton. I wanted her. But I didn't feel like, because I just felt like at that particular time, the Dems was taking some punches and wasn't punching back. And Donald Trump came on the scene and he was doing that insulting. And there are some men in the world who'd like to talk to women that way. I think that that's the appropriate way. And they found an alliance and an allegiance in that kind of demeanor. And I always felt like she didn't punch back hard enough, like she didn't feel like, I think she was very diplomatic and very old school politician. Like, you don't discourage, you don't say mean stuff to people in public. And I think that was a failure for her. I think if she would have just swung a little bit back, whereas I think Kamala swings back.
If she didn't look down on people knew she was looking down on them. And she didn't have that common touch. She's supposed to be great in person and really lovely company, but she really was not a relatable person. And Donald Trump, people knew where to spend the last few weeks. They knew which counties to be in and where to concentrate. They won that race. They won that race on the electoral votes, knowing where to go. I have a feeling neither side is going to make that mistake. Neither side's going to make that mistake this time.
She did go to the states that like you, Babz, when I left Philly and I was driving home, I was like, I had this feeling of dread. And I was a Bernie delegate, and we whipped people on the floor we're going to fall in line. We're going to go vote for Hillary. But I had this feeling of dread driving down from Philly. And when I got home, I was like, man, she's not going to win. I used some other words throughout the summer. But I feel very different. And I didn't feel in terms of 2016, the forces on the ground, they weren't excited. People were doing, but it wasn't like this swell of support to go do things for Hillary. It wasn't there.
I think it would have been the same. I think it would have been that same feeling if Biden didn't step out of this race. I think we would have said, okay,
we're gonna go.
This is our guy. Yes. And I'm a Biden person. Like if he didn't step out, I would have been like, all right, let's
go. Yes.
Together. We gotta let's do it. So.
And that's the very same feeling I got I didn't get that feeling with Hillary. With Biden this time, the last time, we all were like, thank God. And with this time, I'm just feeling everything on the ground is talking to the everyday person. People calling me, not even, I'm like, I don't work for Kamala. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? That didn't happen during Hillary. What are we doing? friends from '08 have reached out. Jen Just and Sid and a whole crew of us who were literally every weekend driving to Pennsylvania. And it was we took turns in whose car and then organized more people. And those very same women, I call them my own model women, are back full-heartedly. What are we doing? Everybody's how many years older? Those who were in their 60s are now, one's 80 and she's like, when are we going, Christine? What car am I going in? I can't drive. So that's happening right now, right here in New Haven. I think if that's happening throughout, she's going to win. I mean, yes, I do this for a living. I don't want to predict and all that, but it's a very different feeling than 2016 with Hillary. No one was willing to go drive. There were no phone calls. What are we doing? What do we have to do? Let's go. And this time, that is absolutely what's happening.
So the whole JD Vance foolishness. I watched somebody asked Nancy Pelosi, do you think Trump made a mistake in picking JD Vance as his running mate? And she was like, no. And I know why she said no, because I think he's a failure in this regard. I think he's a colossal failure. And when you compare the two to the Democratic vice president nominee, I mean, it's a whole different. I don't think people like JD Vance. I don't even think Republicans like JD Vance. I don't think they. I think if he fell down the stairs, they wouldn't.
I don't hate JD Vance. I think he's been despicable in the way he went back what he honestly believed about Trump being Hitler and all that. But he's a very interesting legislator and about the way he's trying to forge some of this new labor populism in bipartisan stuff. So he's a terrible candidate. And I don't respect what he's done in his positions. But I think both he and Walz are intellectually interesting. And they have the potential to be interesting vice presidents. Walz, most interesting thing to me is his understanding of China. He was intellectually curious about China and spent decades going there, meeting with all sides, bringing kids. They are the number one superpower after us. They're the most important country we're going to deal with. You're going to have a vice president who has a nuanced understanding and context. And similarly, with Vance, you're going to have the potential for bipartisan legislation, some of which he has co-sponsored. He's a fan of Lena Khan in the SEC. This whole idea of holding big corporations accountable and having some policies that both sides can agree on that help workers. He's not doing that as a candidate. He sold his soul to the cult, and it's not going to help him win. But I think the vice presidents both have the potential to be good vice presidents.
That's interesting, Paul.
Interesting. Yep. Very.
That's very interesting. I wouldn't say I find JD Vance intellectually interesting, but he does bring a different flavor to this whole race. I think that's all I got. I think he's a little nutty, but all right.
Yeah. My God.
Who among us? All right. So what does the Harris Walz campaign absolutely have to do to win this thing, Paul, Christine? You got 4 minutes before Harry Apollo Theater us off.
Well, I would say when you have the day when it's not going right, they hit you with something hard, keep that joy. And joy doesn't mean don't be fierce. It doesn't mean don't respond. It doesn't mean don't be clear about the differences. But that genuine feeling she has and her people in Walz of enjoying politics, enjoying people, enjoying the quest for justice. Like Obama, unfortunately, like Reagan, that I didn't share in, like Clinton, they have this ability to inspire. And in the end, if you can keep the positive message and feeling of inspiring people to be a cause together that includes everyone, you can defeat a campaign whose modus operandi is divide people and get them to hate each other and resent. But you got to keep that. It's going to be tough days when you got to keep that positive energy going.
Yeah, I remember in '08, I can't remember what state that Obama had lost during the primary, and we got a call. We were all on the call because they didn't have staff in Connecticut, but his staff was here, and I housed one of his staff, and Jen just housed the other. I can't remember what state we lost because they were on their way to Connecticut. And we got on a call with Barack, and it was like everybody was like, you know, feeling bad. And he did this little speech. And then the final thing he said, he cursed and said, y'all, we're not gonna let this shit happen again. And everybody started laughing because everybody was beating themselves up. I had the privilege of being on the call because the staff included us because we were so helpful with them being here in Connecticut. And it was just hilarious that he gave everybody sort of grace, right? Okay, we did this. Let's pick ourselves up, dust off, and let's refocus and move forward. And I think if anything like that happens, that's simply what you have to do. The candidate herself will be able to inspire and motivate people, and the Coach Walls, I think, will be able to do that. I really believe the joy needs to continue, and they can. I think about Gus Walls just being excited about his dad and that feeling and that look on his face. And I think if we could just remember that, I think everybody will be fine.
So, Paul, would you go again? Would you go to another Democratic convention?
I would go tomorrow. I had so much fun. That was so much
And I
fun.
cannot believe we missed
time,
each other. I
next
saw
time,
you
Christina, yeah.
across I was like, where's Paul Bass? And then at certain times there's no reception in the hall. Like things just blacked out. Even in I think whatever this, the officials have to do, because at certain times we had no self-service. When you were at no self-service, and I'm like, where is Paul? But I didn't see you again. And I was looking for the press area. But normally all the press is right where you see them on the floor, but this was too small. So the press was up on the second floor, somewhere out. Joy Reid was the only one on the floor, which normally everybody's on the floor. You could sit, even local press, and I couldn't find you.
Next time we're going to go together. Next time we're going to
Yes.
fly together, and we're going to stay in touch every 10 minutes so we don't miss.
Like, where's Paul? I just couldn't believe you were there. And
I'm so sorry.
The first day you were taking pictures of Amy Marks and her son. And saw you on the other side. It was like, and then to get out, it gets really crowded. Somebody has to get out to go around the other side to walk over delegates. You should exit and get around. And I was like, oh, I'll see him tomorrow. And I never saw him. I'm so upset.
I'm sorry. Next time for sure.
Next time for sure.
2028.
Thank y'all for this recap. I really appreciate it. I know people who are listening are appreciating it because I just was so moved. And thank you, Paul, for the opportunity to let me live blog. I was hyped. Like I was all hyped. And I am bummed that Beyonce and Taylor Swift didn't come. I really was.
You know what I observed, honestly, from all of the conventions, there were hardly any celebrities on the floor in the halls. Literally, you would run into any and everybody. And this year, for some reason, I'm like, was that intentional not to have the Hollywood elites or that messaging around Democrats?
They had some. I mean, Oprah was there, Kerry Washington was there. And
yes, but that's it. Only those, but Babz normally, like last couple of times, people are in our seats. Eddie and everybody, Rosario Dawson. There was so many people I had pictures with through the years, all including random stars.
Although I was looking at the NAACP feed, there was a lot of Black celebrities. I think there was a lot of Black celebrities. They had them housed in some place, like they were.
Yeah, they weren't on the floor. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, they weren't on the floor. They weren't on the floor.
Normally, they're all on the floor. You see them in the hallways, going to the bathroom. That was one of my. I'm like, wow, where are they? I saw a couple at the Black Caucus.
I'm surprised I didn't see Hill Harper because he's running for a seat in.
I didn't see him. I went into. And I also, you go on the floor, go into the different states. I wanted to see the Congress people who's running, and they weren't there. Even AOC wasn't on the floor. She was up in one of the suites. So yeah, it was interesting for me. I didn't see as many celebrities as I normally see at those things. Okay. It was purposeful.
Well, thank y'all for your time this morning. I appreciate it. Thanks, Harry. So I'll be back at 10:15 with Jackie Buster because it's the second anniversary of the passing of Ron Lawrence, and they're having a big shindig back at Toad's place this Sunday. So she's coming on to talk a little bit about that. So 2 years since Ron Lawrence has passed. So I'm excited to see what the foundation is doing and what the lineup is for Sunday. So thank you, Paul Bass
Thank
and
you.
Christine Bartlett Josie, friends
Thank you.
and political bigwigs. I'll see y'all later.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
The delegation has COVID, right?
Yeah. Take good care. I'll see y'all later. Hi, this is Babz Rawls-Ivy from New Haven, Connecticut, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM.